Hi, my name is Liza Meynig, and I am passionate about seeing women break free from traditionalism and religion without leaving God behind. I grew up in a church that modeled legalism and hypocrisy. I ended up in an abusive relationship that caused me to question everything I thought I believed in. I was a part of a college ministry that was a borderline cult, and I've worked as a missionary for several ministries where I experienced terrible leadership and a poor representation of Christ. Because of this, I tried to leave it all behind, and I clung to feminism and men. But none of that seemed right either. What I have discovered in this incredibly difficult journey is God's true character and people who are living the lives in Christ I didn't believe existed. It is true. You don't have to be held back by religion. You don't have to hide who you really are because of legalism. But you also don't have to swing to the opposite extreme and leave your relationship with God behind. In this podcast, you will be given spiritual and practical tools to overcome religion, all while strengthening your relationship with God. It's time to become the woman you were meant to be. It's time to become a warrior. Y'all, this interview is so important, and it was also so much fun. But I want to pre-warn you, we had quite the Wi-Fi issues during this interview. So I want to go ahead and let you know the quality of this video is not amazing. We did a Zoom call and we both did not have the best Wi-Fi connection. So it still has wonderful content. It is still most definitely an episode you want to stay tuned for. I interviewed one of my very best friends, Healy, and she is going to talk about being a young single woman in ministry. So if you can, please bear with the poor quality. I promise it will be better next time. Thank you so much for understanding. Welcome to the Warriors Podcast. I'm your host, Liza, and I'm so excited about this guest today. She's one of my very favorite people and the perfect person, I think, for this conversation. This is one of my best friends, Healy. Hi, Hannah.
Hi. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. I'm so excited that you're coming on to talk about this. For those of you who don't know you, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself and what you're passionate about?
Yes. So my name is Hannah. I am from the Dallas area. Me and Liza actually met because we went to Africa together.
Yes.
So we have a really fun story. We'll probably get into that.
Yep.
But yes. It bonded us. Africa bonded us for sure.
It really did.
I am super passionate about missions and even more so than that, just about ministry in general. So I think, missions and ministry just go hand in hand. And so I'm really excited to just talk about my journey today.
Yes. And we do have such a fun story of meeting in Africa. We did a 3-month mission school to Iris Global. It's called Harvest School. And I did not know you beforehand, but a bunch of us got together on the Harvest School site and our Facebook page, and we found each other and started hanging out, and we sat together the entire ride there. And that's
next to Nelson Mandela's bodyguard.
Yes.
That was crazy.
So cool. Yes, he was. And it was on that flight where I was like, I love this girl. Like, she is amazing. And what I can never get over is that you are 7 years younger than me. You were only 19 years old when we went to Africa, and you're 23 now, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But when I found out how old you were, I was like, there's no way. I really thought you were older than me.
Well, tell them about your preconceived ideas you had of me.
Oh, right. Okay. And this actually proves what a beast you actually are, because we had a dinner that we went to. It was another person in the Dallas area. Their parents wanted to cook us all a good dinner before we left. And I had not met you yet. I had only chatted with you in group text, and you walked in and your wedges and your Kendra Scott jewelry. You had this big floppy hat and your just fancy clothes. And I'm pretty sure I had gone fishing that day and just threw on makeup
just to say that I looked fine.
Yep.
And when you walked in, I was like, oh, this poor girl, we are going to Africa. Like, does she even, does she even
You thought I was going to
know?
die out there.
I did. I was like, look at this bougie Dallas, Texas girl. And when we got to Africa, you were amazing and you looked great the whole time.
Thank you.
Well, I think my favorite is that you never cared if you got dirty. Like, I've never really heard you complain about anything. And on days where I could not function anymore in Africa, you were just in the dirt with all the babies, playing with them in your cute dress and floppy hat. And I was like, she wins.
Yeah. And at the airport, remember my bags were too big and or I had too many bags or something. So I had to repack in the airport. And I grabbed my floppy hat and I was like, I'm keeping this. I have to take this with me. Everybody judged me for it, but there it was in the dirt.
Which goes to show you can't judge a book by its cover. And it goes to show that character is so much more than what you look like.
Yeah.
So I have apologized since then for the I mean, you're always adorable. You always look amazing. Anyway.
We needed each other. All that to say, we needed each other in Africa.
We're really different, but we do need each other. Yes. So
but it works.
It does. Well, I want to dive into why I've brought you here today. I asked you to come on this particular show because I want you to talk about your journey in missions. I feel like there are so many women, including myself, who either want to be on the mission field and don't feel like they can because they're young and single. And there seems to be a lot of stigma around young single women on the mission field. Right. And there also seems to be a lot of rules and just religion that goes around that. So I had to fight really hard to step into what I felt like the Lord was calling me to do. So when I heard your journey, I was so inspired because I thought, praise the Lord. Like, I struggled thinking, do all of us women have to fight this hard for our place on the mission field or in ministry? And I feel like you were really launched and championed, and you have a story of what women's journey should be like. So I want you to share a little bit about that. What inspired you to do missions?
Yeah, no, I think that's so powerful. And like you said, I really was championed by my parents, by the church that I grew up in. And just to give a little backstory, I started going to the church that I'm at now when I was like a little junior higher. And so my pastors moved from Washington and they were at this camp and I was just this little religious girl. I'd go to this camp and encounter God, get wrecked. It was amazing. And then they were so passionate about raising up young people and raising up women and men, and really launching them into their purpose. And so they provided us a bunch of mission trips that we could go on. So the first mission trip I went on, I was 14. We went to Cancun, Mexico, which we got a lot of heat for because everyone was like, why are you going to Cancun? People go there for vacation and for honeymoons. And we're like, okay, but so we get there and it was just an awesome trip. And we ended up doing ministry in these villages that were maybe like 30 minutes to an hour outside of Cancun. So we were just based there. But it was my first experience overseas. It was my first experience on the mission field. And my dad actually got to come with me, which was
that's so
really
cute.
hilarious.
Dad. He's adorable.
Yeah. And it was really special. But that's where I saw miracles for the first time, healings for the first time, and really just experienced the heart of missions. One cool story from that trip is we did ministry like all across the board. So we did evangelism, kids ministry, just everything. And then at night we would hold services for anybody in the village. So at the very end of one of the services, we asked anybody who needed healing to come up to the front. And this mom brought her 11-year-old daughter up front. And I remember seeing this girl the day before we were doing ministry in the village. And I was walking with her and I asked her a few questions. She didn't say anything, just never was talking. And I just thought she was really shy. But then the next day when her mom brought her up for healing, she was like, she's been mute her entire life. And she's an 11-year-old girl, been mute her entire life. So our team got to pray for her. So I'm this little 14-year-old watching this and like in there with them. And we're praying for her. And she begins to speak. God healed her, untangled her vocal cords, and she begins to speak. And the very first words she said were, "Jesus, I accept you into my heart." And so it was really powerful. And being in a place where not only were we able to have that freedom to like pray for healing and believe for healing and to be young and to be a woman and to be involved in that, was just awesome. Yeah. And it kind of just set me up for this, like, nothing's about me anymore. Like that's story such just a good statement. Yes. I feel like when you start to serve, and everybody says it in so many different ways, if you serve or give, it's so much more fulfilling. But yeah, on the mission field, it's like you start to see the power of God and you start to see his character in ways that you haven't seen it before. And you're just like, okay, God, I surrender. And it is a constant surrendering. I feel like every trip I've done, I come home and it's marked me in a different way. So when you went to Thailand, because that's a country that I feel like, especially being a young single female, a lot of people would have an issue with because of all the trafficking, the poverty, and the drugs, all of that. So going as a teenager, did you experience a lot of pushback doing that or not? Not just because of the environment that I was in. Our pastor's wife, she is incredible. And she like did a bunch of missions in her single years. And so I think just having that background, and some of the other leaders on the trip had been involved in YWAM, Youth with a Mission, and just involved on the mission field as single young women. So I had already seen that background and seen it done in a very healthy way. And so I think that kind of just gave me the background of knowing that I never felt like I wasn't qualified for it because I had seen other people go before me and do it well. And so then when they opened up this invitation for anybody to come and get training, and the way they did it was so cool. So we had training for like a few months before we went. And then we had a bunch of awesome leaders come on the trip, and we went and we did a variety of ministry. And so I think it was probably, my parents were definitely a little bit afraid sending their 15-year-old.
Naturally.
And I had no idea what Thailand was. Me and one of my best friends, Amanda, she was like, yeah, let's go. And I was like, yeah, let's go. But we were like, where even is Thailand? What is Thailand? Just had no idea we had no idea anything about it. So I think it kind of, I didn't have a lot of fear because I didn't know the stigma that was surrounded by Thailand. But for my parents or for other people other adults in my life, they were kind of freaking out.
Right.
What is that? But I think that something my parents have done so well, just in every season of my life, every decision I've made, is they go to prayer and they don't ever give me an answer based on their own fears, but they're really amazing about just championing me and letting me pray through my own decisions and make decisions for myself and backing me in prayer. And from even before I decided to go to Africa, I was like, hey, this is the opportunity. This is what I'm praying about. Will you guys just pray with me for a couple weeks and see what you hear from God? And so they were faithful at that. They would go to their prayer closets, they would journal, they would like really, really hear from God, and not out of a place of fear, but out of a place of like, what is the call of God on her life? Because they want that for me.
Wow.
And so I've been really, really blessed to have that influence in my life. And for them not to put a bunch of fear on me.
Which I think everything you just said is so key, because even for those listening who are in an environment that is not as healthy as you grew up in, and they're in an environment that is not championing them, what you just said is how people should be treating you, because loving a person is not controlling them. There should never be any control, and it is not fear driven. But if you're both seeking the Lord, if both parties, despite how they may feel, are going to the Lord in prayer, reading the word, they're going to come to the same conclusion. So that's so powerful that your parents understood wanting to be protective and wanting to say no, but still going to the Lord. Because I had to fight for that. And my parents gave me a whole lot of conditions and rules that I had to abide by. And after a lot of wars, we finally were able to strip away enough things from each other to where we could be humble and have that conversation of, okay, we all want to seek the Lord's will here. So let's just do that. So that's really powerful.
Yeah, that is so powerful. And I think it's such a balance because obviously they're not going to be ignorant and send me on a random trip to Thailand when I'm 15. They're going to do their research. They're going to talk to the leadership that I was under, and they did all that. And so they took the practical actions, but they also, like you said, they sought the Lord. I sought the Lord, and they really we were able to come to a really good conclusion. And so I think it really, and now I think about decisions in my life in that perspective, or when I'm walking somebody through something or help, like praying through a decision with someone else and just being like, okay, like let's take the practical and the spiritual and find the balance of how we can combine those together. And we're going to get the result that God wants for us.
Right. I feel like the church has swung to an extreme of, okay, everything is really spiritual and everything's about prayer and the spiritual gifts. But then they just threw out all the practical things. And then in order to balance it out, then they swung to, let's just get practical tools. And we got away from Bible. And now I'm so thankful that we're starting to see those two meet in the middle more so. So I agree. There has to be that research. And even my dad, so on our way home from Africa, you and I ended up having to spoon in the same bed, but it was because my dad was really protective of me. So my dad and I had a deal we worked out. I could go to any country I wanted as long as he can track me. So we have Life 360 on my phone. And if you don't have it, it's an app, like you can always see where somebody's moving and you can zoom in. So I didn't have a place to stay, and we had a long layover in Johannesburg, and you had a place to stay, but the Airbnb there was, or the bed and breakfast there was full. So I text my dad and I was like, hey, I'm going to go find an Airbnb by myself. And my dad texts me back and he goes, nope, I just researched Johannesburg and how dangerous it is. And you need to figure out how to be with a person. So you snuck me into your room and we slept in a twin-size bed together in order for me to honor my father. So like, there's this fine balance between trust the Lord, and a lot of times he's going to push you outside yours and everybody else's comfort zone, but then don't be dumb.
Yes. Which I think both of us have grown in a lot.
Because you and I both are such adventurers and free spirits. We've gotten caught up in the moment and then been like, this is not safe. We're sorry.
Yeah. There were countless times in Africa I would wander by myself in the markets. And the rule, for those of you listening, the rule was you have to be in a group of 4 people during the day and 8 people at night. And I mean, we'd be hitchhiking places, you know, it was, from an outside perspective, it seems crazy, but in the moment you feel safe. And I'd be in the markets and I'd go get excited about something and start wandering off. And then all the guys in our group are like, where did you go? What are you doing? I can't see you. You're blending in with the crowds. And I'm like, I'm sorry.
I know. Like I was just trying to go find a snack. But speaking of that, because that's a really good topic for single women and safety issues, because that is the biggest thing of what is safe, what is not safe. And I feel like that topic could be a podcast in and of itself. But
definitely,
what is your, despite both of our free spirit adventurer selves, what is your gauge for this is not safe, or this is how I stay safe? Are there any practical tools that you have set in place that you're constantly paying attention to?
Yeah, no, I love this question, and I'm very passionate about this because I am very spontaneous, free spirit, but I have such a balance. It's weird. I have such a balance of being overly cautious about things. And so, and I think I've just learned a lot being in other countries and under good leadership that was like, no, like you should not have gone out at night with a group of a few girls and ridden on a random tuk-tuk and gotten lost in the streets of Bangkok. Like that wasn't smart. And I'm like, thank God you protected me.
Yes. Yes.
You know, like I think there is definitely the balance of like God's watching out for us, but he also gives us a brain so we don't make stupid mistakes. Right. And even so me, Amanda, and one of our other friends, Katie, we took a girls' trip to Thailand last year. And it was just a vacation and we were visiting friends. And one of our Airbnbs, just all of this stuff went down where they were messaging us and we were about to go stay.
That. Yes.
Yep. And they were like, we have to pick you up. And we're like, no, we don't know who you are. We're not going to have you pick us up. We're going to take public transportation. We're comfortable with the area. So we're going to just get there ourselves. And they were like, no, we have to pick you up. So I'm starting to get freaked out because like they're being very aggressive and telling me that we have to get in a car with them. And then long story short, we're like, no, we're not going to do that. They're like, okay, we'll meet you in the parking garage then and walk you up. And I was like, I'm just going to go in through the front doors. I want to be safe.
Right. Yeah.
And we just had this check in our spirit. So I think it really is just having, being in tune with God and having discernment of, you know, what's safe, you know, it's not. You've given me a brain and you've given me discernment to not put myself in situations. And so anyways, we call Airbnb and we're like, we're going to cancel. We need our money back. And it ended up working out well. But I was like, I'm not going to take the risk of getting kidnapped.
Right.
We're three girls in our 20s. And so we don't want to take the risk. And it all worked out great. But I think that there's definitely a balance of being positive and not constantly stressed out about what could happen to you and trusting God, but at the same time having that practical balance of discernment and of reading the room and of being very aware of your surroundings. And just practical things on that is trusting the locals and like constantly going to locals and being like, hey, what do you know about this area? What do you know about this culture and how do I keep myself safe? And what is a target? Like how like if I'm dressing a certain way, am I making myself more of a target? Or just asking the hard questions and finding out what I can do to keep myself safe, because I never want adventure to pull me into something that I'm not safe doing. Right. And so just having that really practical side of learning what to do and being surrounded by people on your trip who are going to keep you safe as well.
Exactly. I totally agree, because it is so easy to feel like you're invincible sometimes when you are maybe on a red light district, which I've done a lot of red light district ministry, and so have you. And you're walking down those streets and you're in bars and clubs in a different country. But sometimes I think, or at least I struggle with feeling like, oh, I'm in God's assignment right now, so he's just totally going to take care of me. And there's some absolute truth to that when God has put something in motion and it is his will, his grace is going to cover it. But we still have a role to play in. Yes. Yeah. I've been in red light districts. I was on Soho in London one time, and I've been on so many red lights and clubs that I just felt invincible. And I was walking along and there was this dark alley, but there was a prostitute in this alley who was just bawling her eyes out. And I knew it was like 1:00 in the morning. We had been doing ministry for hours, and I saw her, and your heart goes out, and I felt empathetic. You feel all the things and you're like, what's wrong with this girl? So I was with my team because when you're on a red light, it's usually you have X amount of guys to each girl. So that way it's really safe. I left my guys when we were talking, and in my brain, I thought, I can't just leave this girl crying on the side of the road. And you feel compelled, and when you're, you know, all the things, it's like, this is the Lord, I found this girl. And I just kept thinking, my guys can see me, so it's all right. I started walking down that alley, and I felt in my spirit, which is another reason why it's so important to listen to Holy Spirit. He so talks to you. I felt this like, no, walk away, turn around, no. And sure enough, I was still far enough away, thank God, but a guy came out and just started laying into her. And all I had to do was walk away and just pray for that girl. Yeah. Because in that moment, if I had approached the situation, what am I going to do? I'm just going to make it worse. Right. And so it's those kinds of really difficult things sometimes that you have to still gauge, like you want to be Superman, but you're not. You still have to be safe. So I had to turn around, but I remember just really praying for that girl when I went to bed that night. And you just have to believe there's power in prayer. Yeah, and that day I still think about that girl sometimes, but I'm just like, Lord, I'm going to trust that you are there and I'm not, and you can make a difference. So yeah, exactly.
I think that's so true, because we think, especially caught up in the moment of ministry, we're like, we've already seen these girls set free or these girls saved. And so you're like on a roll and you're like, I know God wants to do this. And yes, that's true. But if we just kept going and like we weren't sensitive to the Holy Spirit, then we would put ourselves in danger. And I think there is such a balance of that, and just knowing like he's the one that's watching over them. He's going to take care of them. Right. And it's not always up to me.
But for women who do not feel empowered to step out on the mission field, or maybe they're terrified because of all the things they've been told, what would you say to a listener who feels like missions is something she wants to do, or maybe it's just once a year, or maybe it's full time? What would you say to that woman?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I do think, especially because sometimes there is pushback and sometimes you just feel not qualified. And you go to another country, like, what am I going to do as a 23-year-old American girl? Like, what part do I really have to play? And I think sometimes you can get in your head disqualifying yourself based on even your own insecurities, or based on things that people have told you or that culture has told you. But it just boils down to having a confidence that God has told you to go, and then praying for the right doors to open. And there's been situations where I've led trips, I've been the youngest person on the team and I'm the leader, or I've been one of the only, I led a team to Scotland last year, and it was an amazing team. It was so much fun, but I was the only leader, and it was just me and another girl, and the rest of the team was guys, and they were all older than me. And like one of them was a dad. So it was just a funny situation. I'm like, God, what are you doing? Like, am I even qualified for this? And just those insecurities and fears. And he really had to teach me, I called you to this, so I'm going to equip you for it, and I'm going to empower you to do it. But then not letting those insecurities take me to a place where I would be like, I'm the only leader, and like a power struggle. It's really, because leading is all about empowering other people. So when I could go in with that perspective of like, yes, I am the leader, and I'm gonna lead well, but I'm also gonna know my weaknesses and say, okay, I can't physically protect the entire team, so I'm going to choose one of the guys on our team to be like our bodyguard, to know that the areas that somebody else can be strong in, and really just empowering the team to be leaders. And so it's not the Hannah show. It's not like you're the only one leading, but really just empowering people with you. And so I don't know if that fully answers your question, but I think really it's so simple, and it just boils down to confidence that God has called you to go, and having patience for the people who do tell you that you're not ready, or tell you that you shouldn't do it, and taking that and taking what you can from it, and always being teachable but also being confident of what God's called you to do.
I agree. That does answer the question, because I think a lot of women, I was one of them because I'm very feisty. A lot of women will just straight up rebel and just be like, well, I've had enough. This is what I feel the Lord has called me to, and I'm just going to cut the cord and go do what I want. And there's a level where you do have to make a statement. I had to make a statement because I came from a lot of control. But I did it with a lot of rebellion and a lot of dishonor. And if you are really trying to hear the Lord on how to cut that cord, eventually God is so good and he's so full of grace. Eventually your time is going to come. And if you're praying and seeking the Lord on it, then hopefully a lot of the people in your life are going to fall in line at some point, or they're going to feel that grace where it's like, oh, okay, we can let her go. I also think some people are just in probably very unhealthy situations, and I would just say get out of that, but you can get out of that and run away from it without using all of the anger and the rebellion too. So
that's such a good point. And this is a funny story, but so I did 2 years of a discipleship school at our church. And afterwards, God in the midst of that school had just given me so much confirmation about my heart for missions, my heart for the mission field and for people and ministry. And so I was graduating and I was ready to go. I was so excited. And there was an opportunity that I had for a school through YWAM. And I remember being like, okay, this is God. I'm going to do this. Like my leadership was on board. It was awesome. And I started running towards the open door. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, no communication, like the door just slammed in my face. And I was like, what on earth? Like, God, you said that this was your promise for me. What am I supposed to do? And so then I was just praying about the next transition, the next season. And that's when everything with Africa came up. And so it was like he had to close a door in order for me to find the door that I was supposed to go through. And so I totally surrendered that first dream. And I was like, okay, God, maybe that wasn't in your will. Maybe it was just leading me to get where I needed to go. And it was really cool. It's kind of a long story, but he circled it back around and I got to go after Africa. But I just think that there can be a lot of opposing things and a lot of things that could take you out, whether it's a closed door or whether it's something somebody says to you. Like I had, I'm about to out myself so hard. I don't know if I've told you this story.
Oh, I'm excited.
So before going to Africa, I knew it was the right step. I'm trying to raise all this money. And I had gotten a speeding ticket. So me and one of my best friends, Katie, were driving home from Dallas. And I'm like, Katie, I have to go to court because I have this speeding ticket and I've got to get back. But there was standstill traffic. So we're on 75. And I'm like, I need to find a way to get out of this. So I cut into the HOV lane. And sadly enough, we were under a dark bridge. So I didn't see it, but this car was coming, slammed right into me.
No.
It was a terrible wreck. Everybody ended up being fine, but it was just such an awful situation. And then to make it worse, the police officer comes up and he's asking me questions, and I'm already bawling because I'm like traumatized. And he's asking me questions like, why did you do it? Where are you going? And then he asked me what I want to do with my life. And I'm this just graduated this discipleship school, have all these dreams ahead of me. I had just signed up for like 2 mission trips that summer. And then I'm also going to Africa afterwards for a few months. And so I tell him and I'm bawling. I'm like, officer, I want to be a missionary. And I want to go overseas. And I want to help those who are hurting and like in poverty. And I'm just telling him this. I'm like, why are you asking me this? Then he goes, why would you want to do that? That's a stupid dream. People here are hurting too. Just totally shutting it down so that I'm crying even more.
Goodness.
And anyways, I get out of the situation, but it was funny because afterwards, even though there was so much opposition, I was even more confident that I knew that that's what God had for me. And that was the next step that God had for me, because there was so much pushback, so much opposition. And now I'm thinking about how I'm going to like pay for all these tickets that I have. And I'm thinking about like, what if my license gets suspended and I can't work and I can't raise money for Africa? But it was just funny, because I feel like for a lot of us, or women who want to be on the mission field, or even men, there can be a ton of opposition towards not even just the mission field, but your call on your life. And you have to recognize the situations where the enemy is obviously trying to take you out, and to just have a fight in you that's like, no, I am not going to be taken out by this. I'm going to keep pursuing this call, and you're going to see it come to pass. But then on the other side, if there's leadership in your life that you really trust that's telling you maybe this isn't the right step, then having seasons where you can honor that and you can submit to that, and then God can bring it around full circle later.
That's so good. I love that. And I did not know that story.
Really?
It is really traumatic. No, I didn't.
It was crazy.
But you're so right. I think opposition does not equal no. Sometimes it does, exactly. But my first reaction when I feel and see opposition in my life in any situation is to fight. But I am a big fighter anyway. So I understand that that goes against the grain for some people. Some people are the freeze or the flight. But if you find opposition in your life, don't take it as an automatic, oh, I'm not supposed to do this. Give it some pushback and pray about it and see if that thing moves. And sometimes it is a closed door, like you were saying with going to harvest school instead of going to YWAM first. So you never know, but it's so important to seek the Lord, to pray about stuff, and to get in the Word. So thank you so much for coming on today. I love all of your stories, and I love just how fun and spontaneous you are, but then also how wise you are. You're sometimes more wise than I am. So I just value you so much. I love that you did this today. Thank you.
Thank you. It's so fun. I'm excited for your podcast. I can't wait to hear all of the episodes.
Oh, thank you.
It's amazing.
It'll be so good. Well, everyone, we will see you in the next episode.